Hey guys, it's Kevin and my review for Dolittle. And what Dolittle is essentially about is basically we center on, well, Dr. Dolittle, but he is someone that has gone into seclusion after his wife's death, and basically, you know, he still lives with his animals and things like that, but he's come somewhat a bit of a hermit. He doesn't really visit a lot of people these days. However, when he is notified by this young girl that the Queen of England has basically fallen ill, who he is close friends with, basically, he has to go on a, as he calls it, a perilous journey with the help of his assistant Stubbs, and basically they have to go on an adventure in the hopes of finding a cure for her. So Dolittle overall, I didn't really know how this film was going to be. The fact that it was a January release, and especially all of the production hell it's gone through, which you guys can look deep into that. There's been so many problems with this movie, whether it was rendering of certain animals, whether it was some, like, dog that was on set that was apparently very racist and kept them from getting stuff done, or Stephen Gaghan just, like, being out of his mind and, like, not having an idea of, like, what he wanted to do, or them having to bring in Jonathan Lieberman for, like, a couple scenes and rewrites and things like that. There was just so many things that were troubling about this movie. There were so many things that were getting me very worried. I really did not know how this film was going to turn out. In terms of the Dr. Dolittle character, I think it's a solid character. I really do. It's just, I don't think personally there has ever been a film that has fully realized his potential. The original, and I actually prior to this watched every single Dr. Dolittle film. That's how much I care. That's how much I care about you guys. I watched every single Dr. Dolittle film. The original from, like, the 60s, I think is really bad. It's very dated. It's honestly really problematic. It's got a really bad performance from Rex Harrison, who I normally love, but he's so miscasted in this movie and honestly pretty unlikable. So that one's really not good at all. And then the Eddie Murphy ones, the first one is fine. Eddie Murphy is easily the best thing about it, but I don't think it's very funny. I don't think it really holds up all that well, and I don't even think that the film utilizes Murphy's talents because he's playing a fairly normal role, and those are not the kind of characters I think Murphy does the best with. I think he's best with the more, you know, bombastic, over-the-top characters, and this one just didn't really work. And then Dolittle 2, I fucking hate. I think this is the definition of just a really stupid sequel that was just trying to be more kiddie and things like that, and I just did not like it at all. So in the case of Dolittle going into it, I really did not have much anticipation. It just seemed like a film that was not going to be very good. But I have to say, even going into it, not thinking that this would be a good film, especially with all the, onslaught of, like, terrible reviews, this is way worse than I ever could have expected. Dolittle is a disaster on pretty much all fronts, but we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And look, I think going in this movie, that's probably going to be one of the biggest draws going into it because there's such a talented cast here. But I have to say, this film, I don't think utilizes them all that well. And there's many problems with this movie, but I think maybe the most egregious of them all is Robert Downey Jr.'s performance, who, look, coming off the heels of Avengers Endgame, I was very excited to see him in another film. I really do want to see Robert Downey Jr., branch out and do other films and, have some really challenging and meaty roles other than Tony Stark, because I know he can do it. But I'll just say right now, this ain't it, Chief. This ain't it for sure, because I have no idea what the fuck he is doing in this movie. He has this, like, between his, the way he goes about this character, almost kind of being like Rex Harrison's. Like, we're back to the Rex Harrison character, where he's honestly kind of unlikable. He is kind of a dick to pretty much everyone. He's just, like, yelling at everyone in this movie and doesn't really seem to enjoy their presence throughout most of it. But I think the worst choice of them all is this very, whispery type breathy accent that he has in the film, to the point where you can't even tell what he's saying, because he's talking like this throughout the whole fucking movie. And it's terrible. It's absolutely atrocious. There's even points where he'll get loud, and it seemed like he was trying to do, like, an impression of, like, Willem Dafoe in, like, The Lighthouse, and I just thought that he was atrocious in this movie. This is easily the worst performance I have ever seen from him, and I hate saying that because I think he's such a charismatic and likable actor, but here, I really don't know what happened in this movie, but this really did not turn out well at all. I can't figure out if he was just miscasted or if RDJ just had this really awful choice and nobody told him, like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that. It really just felt like everything just fell apart when it came to his characterization between, like I said, that, the accent, and the fact that some of his lines even feel kind of audio dubbed and you can tell that he's not actually saying them on set. It's just a disastrous performance. It's easily one of the worst of the year so far, and I hate saying that because I think that was basically the big thing that I was like, that was the one constant. I was like, okay, even if this movie fails, Robert Downey Jr. is going to give a good performance, and when not even he is good in the movie, that's when you know this entire film falls apart. As far as the rest of the cast goes, I mean, there are so many actors in this film. Some of them I actually don't think are too bad. I did like the main kid that was in this movie. I thought he actually did a pretty solid job. Harry Collett, yeah, Harry Collett. I thought he was actually kind of solid. I liked what he did in this film, and I could see him being a lot better in, I could see him being really good in, like, a much better film. I thought he did a good job. Same with Carmel, Laniado. I could see her being really good here in another film as well, but she really doesn't have much to do. The other human actors, I mean, almost all of them are bona fide cameos, whether it's Antonio Banderas as this really over-the-top pirate, or Jessie Buckley, who, as Queen Victoria, who's literally, like, asleep in a bed throughout most of it and has almost nothing to do. However, the worst human performance has to be Michael Sheen. I love Michael Sheen as an actor. I think he's fantastic. But here, I don't know what he's doing. He's so over the top. He's playing the, like, cartoony type villain. And I couldn't stand him in this movie. I thought he was really, really hamming it up here. And not in a way that really worked very much at all. I thought he was really bad in this movie. The rest of the voice cast, isn't that bad. Here's the thing I will say. The voice cast is not bad. Everyone does a solid job, whether it's Emma Thompson, Rami, Malek, Kumail Nanjiani, John Cena, Ray Fiennes, all good in the movie. I would not blame them for, what the film turns out. It's just the film does not utilize them all that well. There is no voice actor that really sticks out to me like, oh, they're doing such a great job. I mean, I guess Emma Thompson is the big standout because I thought she was the most that consistent in terms of voice acting, but everyone else is just kind of fine here. There's not a lot to really say about them in terms of voice acting, and considering that a lot of this film is banking on its talents, the fact this film did not utilize them all that well, I think is a big problem for sure. But now let's get to the directing and the writing, which, oh my god, where do we even begin here? Stephen Gaghan's directing. Look, I've liked other things that he's done in the past. I think that he is a pretty good director. There are things that he's done where he has shown that he does have talent. But as his director in this movie, it really just felt like he had no idea what he wanted to do with this film. The tone in this film is so inconsistent. There's points in this movie where it feels like it's trying to be a fun adventure. It's trying to be like a fun adventure that harkens back to, like, classic, like, family films and things like that. And the film does do a okay job with that at points. But then it tries to be more of like the Eddie Murphy Dr. Dolittle film, and it does not work at all. The humor in this movie, all of it falls flat. There's not a single joke in this film that made me laugh. I thought it was so bottom of the barrel in terms of humor, and again, I don't really know who to fault for that. I really don't. I don't know if it's Stephen Gaghan, if it's Jonathan Lieberman, who I said came in to do some, like, rewrites and things like that. I don't know if it's him. I don't know if it's Chris McKay. I don't know who you blame for, like, the terrible humor in this movie, but it's absolutely atrocious. And then when the film tries to be serious, it's just boring. So you have a film that is either obnoxious or boring, and it's like the worst combination to have whatsoever. The directing here, there's such a huge lack of a vision, and I know that there was so much production hell that this movie went through, and any sort of vision that they were trying to have, though, completely got lost in translation, because I really had a hard time trying to figure out what this film was exactly going for, and I don't think they did a very good job with that. I do think that it did have good intentions. I think that this is a film that really wanted to do something good, but unfortunately Gaghan's directing is just really bad here. It did not seem like, and I understand that the film went through a lot of production issues, but a good director can try to push through that. A good director can try to make that not noticeable, and if anything, he just accentuated I would say, you know, how noticeable it really is. He just added to it, and it just made it that much worse in that way. But the screenplay here is easily the worst thing about this movie. Aside from Robert Downey Jr.'s performance, I think the screenplay is maybe the worst thing about this entire film, because this is such a clusterfuck of a screenplay. The biggest issue, I think, with this film is its story. The story itself does have a lot of potential. You have him settling out to try to find this curse from the queen. This is the thing that finally gets him out of his, you know, like, stupor that he's in and things like that. I think that's an okay idea, but when everything feels so rushed and nothing is really dived into, and there's almost no time to really even get into everything, there's not really much of a reason to care, and the entire plot falls flat on its face because of that. And again, it's mainly because they don't really take any time to get you into this situation. We have a very quick, rushed exposition opening with, like, which is actually kind of solid. Like, I actually didn't mind the opening of this movie. I thought it actually did have some potential, but it's so rushed. It's so, like, glossed over. There's so many things that the film gets into, like how him and Queen Victoria had, like, this fallout, but the film never really dives into it. So many of these characters that he meets, like Antonio Banderas, Michael Sheen, Jim Broadbent, he's supposed to have, like, some kind of a past with. The film at least hints on it, and we never really see them build on it. We never really see them flesh that out all that much, and that's really the biggest issue, is that every single story thing in this movie, it just feels so service level. Even the death of his wife, it feels like an afterthought. It feels like they just did this so I don't complain that Dolittle is unlikable, but because that's not dived into, Dolittle is an unlikable asshole in this movie. There's not a lot to like about this character. Yes, he can talk to animals. Yes, there are certain things that he can do, but he's not a very likable character. You don't really feel like this is a guy that lives up to, like, his namesake. Everyone's, like, hyping him up to be this great guy, and I just didn't really feel it throughout the movie, and I don't think that really worked at all. And like I said, RDJ's sort of accent that he's doing really does not help matters at all. Him just talking like this throughout the whole movie. We need to sail on this perilous journey, and him talking like that all the time. It's like, what are you doing? What is this choice? And that's my thing. It's not so much RDJ's performance. The fact that nobody told him, like, this is a bad idea. Nobody said anything about that, and because of that, it just makes this character kind of insufferable and really hard to watch at points, and I don't think they did a good job with that. And then when it comes to the animal side of this movie, there's so many choices that they make there that I just really despise. Every single one of the animals in this film, there's barely anything for them to do. I mean, you have, like, Rami Malek's character, Chi-Chi, who goes through a very, generic arc of him, like, not really believing in himself, and then he's able to, like, persevere through it, and, you know, that all happens, and there's not much going on there. Craig Robinson, for a while, felt like they were going to do something with him, but they don't really do much of anything there. There's so many choices that just didn't really work in terms of the animals. It also does not help that rarely ever does it seem like Robert Downey Jr. is actually responding to them. There are responses that he'll make, but it doesn't feel like it's, like, on set. It feels like these are things they added in after the fact, and it's incredibly noticeable in that way, and it really brings the whole film down, because you'll have these animals in these, like, goofy shenanigans, and the humans barely have, like, any response to it. It's really weird. It almost feels like they wanted this just to be, like, an adventure film, and then added the animals in after, and it does not work at all. And look, I've never liked the animals in this movie. I found them relentlessly annoying in pretty much all of these films. But at least in the Eddie Murphy Dolittle films, he would respond to them. He'd have interaction with them. It felt natural. Here, it doesn't even feel like they're in the same movie at points. It's really odd. Not to mention, their dialogue is absolutely atrocious. This is an actual piece of dialogue in this movie. Dolittle is in this, like, cave or whatever. This rabbit comes in and basically talks about, like, Dolittle made a problem. So his response is, uh-oh, Dolittle made a little doo-doo. So yeah, if that's the kind of humor that you love, go nuts, because there's tons of that in this movie. Stuff like that, I think, perfectly sums up the kind of humor that this film is trying to go for. It's so bottom of the barrel, it's so kiddie, and it's so kiddie to the point where I don't even think kids in a theater are going to laugh. Now, I had no children in my theater. None. There were no kids in my theater whatsoever. I had like 3 old ladies who laughed at everything. They found everything so hysterical in this movie. They thought, oh, that was so cute. That was such a great film. Don't you love Dolittle? And I'm just sitting there like, just kill me now. This is really, really bad. And yes, everyone's talked about it. There is a scene in this movie involving farts and Robert Downey Jr., and it's one that I'll never be able to unsee. It's absolutely disgusting. I can't believe that it actually got in this film. It feels like something that they would have cut out because the film is above it, and that's the other thing. This film, even though we're in a new decade, this film really sets us back, because it feels like one of those films that would come out in like the early 2000s, and we look back on now, and it doesn't feel like it holds up, and it already doesn't hold up. This is already a film that does not hold up in this decade. There's not a question about it whatsoever. This is easily the most dated. Maybe not. I do think the Rex Harrison one is still way more problematic. There's a lot of, like, racial stereotypes and things like that. There's nothing like that here. But in terms of age, I think this is going to be the one that shows its age the most, for sure, besides that Rex Harrison one, because it's just very hard to watch at points, and I don't think they handle that well at all. There's a lot of other weird choices this film makes as well. Like, you have Tom Holland as a dog, for instance, and you would think, considering the chemistry that him and Robert Downey Jr. had in the Avengers films, you would think this film would try to expand upon that, would try to make that one of the vocal points of this movie. Instead, what they choose to do is sideline him throughout the entire film, and there's barely any interaction for these two. It's like, this is like, you have so many talented voice actors in this movie, but this is like the most obvious one that you should have given the most to. You should have given him something really good, so we still could have seen that chemistry there, and just, no, they just sidelined him, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is such a stupid choice. There's also a really forced romance between Stubbs and the young girl in this movie. I didn't buy it for a second. It felt so forced to me. There's so many arcs in this film that just feel completely unresolved. There's so many arcs in this film that just kind of feel broken after a while, and it's just not a good screenplay at all. It's an absolute mess on pretty much every level, and I think it's easily the worst thing about this movie. The cinematography here, though, it really does not help the film very much at all. I will say, like, landscape-wise and the look and things like that, it's not too bad. There are a couple things that do work there, but anytime these animals open their mouths, it looks completely unnatural, and you can tell why Gagan was so annoyed by the way certain things were turning out in this film, because there are parts in this movie where the animals don't even look fully rendered. It doesn't look like it's finished and things like that. And it just, it's really ugly to look at points, honestly, and it's just really, really bad here. And it's sad when the animals in the Eddie Murphy Dr. Dolittle film look more real than they do here. Here, they do not look real for a second. You do not believe they're a part of this world, and they do not do a good job with that here at all. The editing in this movie is also really bad. I think this film really rushes through so many key events. There's also a really weird editing choice they make with Dolittle's character when they first introduce him. You'll know it when you see it, but it was very confusing. I don't really know what they were trying to do there. And also, this is one of those films where when it was ending, I was like, wait, we're already here? Like, there's no way this is the ending of the film. And no, it was. It was just that rushed in that way, and I didn't think they did a good job with that at all. Ultimately, Dolittle is a film that had tons of potential, but just failed in almost every respect possible. It has a terrible lead performance from Robert Downey Jr. It has some terrible looking CGI, some of the worst lowbrow child humor that I can think of in a very long time. It has a screenplay that is incredibly fragmented and rushed. There's so many choices in this movie that just don't work at all. It's basically what you would expect from a film that went through this much production hell and went through this many problems, and it is the worst film that I have seen so far this year, easily. If you want to talk about a film that just screams January movie, look no further than Dolittle, because this is absolutely a huge disaster on almost all fronts, and I'm definitely going to give Dolittle overall a D. Look, I have to say, I have seen countless adaptations of this character, and none of them have really worked, and this is now the third one, and I have to say, I think after this, maybe it's just time to put this to rest. I don't really think we're ever going to get a good Dolittle film. I really don't think it's possible, and this film does not change that theory at all. So, yeah, I really think that they should probably just stop with this, because it's 2020, nobody really cares about this property anymore, and I think this should probably be the last straw. I do hope that Robert Downey Jr. finds other projects. I do hope he continues to thrive, but this definitely is not it at all. But either way, guys, in my review of Dolittle, let me know what you guys thought of this movie overall. Look for your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.